It's the Underdogs back with you for another week. NFL Championship Sunday coming up. AFC, NFC. We're excited. I'm Jordan Brenner. No Peter Keating this week. Very, very sad that Peter is taken ill. We wish him the best. Hope he recovers soon. But in his stead, we've got a great, great guest joining us. It's Dave Dameshek, host of Shek Show. You can get that on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts. You know him, you love him. Welcome to our program, Dave.
Jordan, what a pleasure to be with you. May I say, you're not in midseason form. You're in postseason form, fella, which I mean in a good way. I don't mean Mark Andrews postseason form. I mean, good postseason form.
We went there already, and look, most people, my postseason form is most people's preseason form, I think, but I'll take the compliment anyway. But let's get into Mark Andrews and the rest of before we get into previewing this week's games and talking about who's going to go to the Super Bowl, I want to take a second to reflect on a couple of the teams that lost last week, namely the Baltimore Ravens and the Detroit Lions, because I think there's this feeling, and we've all had it as a fan, right, where you feel like your team is good enough to win a championship in whatever sport it is, and you come up short for whatever reason, and you're just staring at this long off season, and it feels like nothing else matters till you get back to this exact same spot a year from now, and there's no guarantee you're ever going to break through. So I kind of want to talk. Let's start with the Ravens. How do you react to a loss like this, and where do you go from here if you're a member of that organization?
The digital empaths of the new millennium insist that you have nothing to hang your head about if you lose that game. But of course, after at minimum 6 months of physical toil and studying playbooks and watching film and everything else and going through the bother of a preseason and then 17 regular season games, with all the traveling involved and disruption to personal life, and then the playoffs and all the promise associated with that. If you aren't hanging your head because you didn't get across the finish line, then I think you're a robot, not a human being. I mean, of course you have something to hang your head about. And the promise, hey, don't worry, you'll be back, is of course an empty one, because there is certainly no assurance that you're going to get there. So yes, I'd be down in the dumps too. It's funny how the playoffs level everybody up. I think the best example out there is the Buffalo Bills of the early 90s. I've been talking about that on my show a lot too. It's sort of in our brains. The Bills, who accomplished one of the great things in the history of sports, which is specifically 4 straight Super Bowls. They went to 4 straight, the greatest teams of all time, the teams that we hold up as the greatest teams of all time. None of them went to 4 straight Super Bowls. The Bills did. And yet our reaction to them in our brains is to pity them on about the same level we do the Browns and the Jets. It's like if you don't win it all in a winner-take-all sport, this is how you're perceived. So I completely get it where the Ravens are concerned. I think they're in some jeopardy already because they lost Mike McDonald, who really tuned up that defense a year ago. So now they're a year further removed from that. I don't know what's going to happen with Todd Monken. I don't know if the failure in Buffalo last weekend is going to be enough to undo any chance he has of becoming a head coach. But if he leaves, that's not a small matter either. So there's a disruption there. I think the Lions are even more trouble, losing both of their coordinators. And I don't want to be the guy who, the Detroit Lions the last couple of years, I don't care what the Cowboys claim. The Lions have been America's team. And I got to say, I think we've probably seen its best days already.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's get in the lines in a second. The Ravens, the part I have trouble with always is this idea, well, we've got to change something. We've got to fix something. As if there's some way to guarantee that you're going to get to this situation. And so I get what you're saying about hanging your heads. Of course you're going to feel down. Of course you're going to feel responsible. But sometimes there's another team that's just as good as you. And I think what we've talked about all year is there's these 5 teams that were a cut above the rest. The 3 in the AFC, the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens, and then a healthy Lions team and the Eagles. So my feeling is you can be frustrated. You can be annoyed that Mark Andrews dropped a ball, all these other things, turnovers. Yes, there were ways the game could have gone different, but you didn't lose to a lesser team. And I think that one way or another, one of those 2 teams was going to be frustrated, upset, felt like they just can't break through. It's the nature of the game, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change coordinators. You need to change coaches. Your quarterback's not good enough. Like sometimes you're just, running into an opponent that's just as good as you. And that takes us to the Lions. Okay. So I will go to my grave saying a healthy Lions team wins the Super Bowl this year. And it is not excuses to talk about when you've lost half your defense to injury. I mean, they couldn't stop Washington. That wasn't a coaching thing. They didn't have good players. Their best players were on the bench. And but here's the other thing. As a fan, you're tempted to say, okay, next year they'll all be back. And we'll just keep rolling. And we've seen time and again, look at the 49ers this year, look at lots of teams that have lost. It never goes that smoothly. So to your point, that offense is intact for a while, right? Like they've got young, talented players. The most important thing is they've got a great line, but they may never get another opportunity as good as this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that carries and the reason the Eagles have been playoff relevant for a decade now is that they, a long time ago, identified what you just said there. It's the least exciting thing that you can point at, but they have loaded up continually on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and that's obviously what the Lions did specifically offensively, and then the injuries decimated them on the defensive side. I'm with you that the Lions have a chance of hanging around. Obviously, the division, the neighborhood is pretty rugged stuff. Projecting ahead just got a little bit tougher there. The robbing of Peter to pay Paul. They're in a worse spot today than they were when the week started, with Ben Johnson not just abandoning them, and he is the secret sauce. Hot take or otherwise, the specimen QBs, the 3 to 6 guys who can offset whatever other mediocrities and deficiencies exist on your roster, on your team, aside, I think there's a powerful case that at some point in the last like 2 to 5 years, that the clever offensive coordinator transcended the guy at the trigger. I mean, Ben Johnson is more valuable than Jared Goff is. I think Kyle Shanahan is more important than Brock Purdy is. And I think that Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy are less significant than the head coaches. So I think the Lions, it's a huge bummer for them. Obviously, the football gods weighed in with a very clear message. You're in the NFC North. Shame on you for putting a dome on that thing. You threw away what should have been a massive home field advantage. You decided otherwise. The other thing is, too, the bait and switch that Dan Campbell must be feeling right now. It's like the premise of him being there was like, I'm going to come in there. I'm going to bite kneecaps and all that kind of stuff to try and offset the miserable history of the Detroit Lions franchise. And slowly, brick by brick, season by season, he turned that team around in attitude and otherwise. And season by season, they got to the playoffs. And then they almost knocked off the Niners. But then that's in the rear view. And this is the year. And everybody's on board. And this team is rolling. Okay, defensive injuries have happened. But this team is still on a roll. And they have the bye and all the rest of it. And then Washington shows up and is like, hey, congratulations on your 4-year turnaround. We drafted a QB. Yeah, that was our turnaround. We drafted a quarterback, and that's better than anything you did. And I guess that's the bottom line of the league, is that in the QB league, it's simplistic and otherwise. If you get the real deal, if you get one of those 3 to 6 specimen guys, it can offset everything else that happens. And here we are with the commies, 60 minutes away. There's never been, obviously, a rookie who's taken his team to a Super Bowl. A quarterback has never done that in 59 years, but now we're 60 minutes away from it happening. And there's no can't happen. It's an impossibility at this point. We're one game away from all these eventualities.
Let's get into that real quick, though. I do want to say to your point about the offensive genius of Ben Johnson and anyone else, it's really easy to call plays when your offensive line gives you massive holes in the running game and all the time in the world for your quarterback to throw. Let's see what he does with the Bears offensive line. But the Commanders, okay, we do underdogs on this show. You've got the team that was picking second in the draft last year, earns a 6 seed. They win 12 games. Now, look, we identified them before the season as like, this team is definitely going to be better. Look, their over-under win total was anywhere from 6.5 to 7.5. So it wasn't like a complete surprise that they improved. it was a surprise that they improved by this much. Are you crediting it solely to Jaden Daniels? Because they made a lot of other changes too.
No, I'm I guess being a little bit glib about it, but this massive philosophical overhaul that took years to happen up in Motor City, kind of like, hey, what happened overnight there in DC? Like they were a punchline and now they're in the title game, kind of effect. Yeah, I think the steadying hand of Dan Quinn was an interesting choice. Obviously, underneath there is Cliff Kingsbury, and maybe that's the secret sauce. Um, I think that I'm with you. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but yeah, in August, yeah, I thought the commies were a little undervalued too. I thought there would be some regression from the Cowboys. I didn't foresee Dak Prescott happening, and what I was wrong about was a little regression from the Eagles offensively. That didn't happen. I don't know if you heard Saquon had a good year, but
we're all Giants fans on this show, so we've ignored it.
Oh, good. Good. That's probably the best course of action, because talking about it, especially when cameras are rolling, it could come back to haunt you. I am not.
I've heard.
I'm not talking about anybody in particular.
Let's get into this matchup. Eagles favored 6.5, depending. We're looking at DraftKings at 6 right now. Commanders obviously beat them late in the season. Jalen Hurts' health is a big question mark. How viable do you think Washington's chances are of winning this game outright and making a Super Bowl run as an underdog?
I would say if Jalen Hurts came through the game, there wasn't video of him, holding his knee and all that kind of thing. I would have the Eagles comfy in this one. As it is, the thing you would point back to is like, I think you kind of, the second Eagles and commies game is kind of moot because Jalen Hurts gets dinged early on in that one. And so now you reject the rest of that game, except for the fact that he is hobbled. And there is a fair chance, I think, that we'll see Kenny Pickett in this one, same as we did in that game. So picking this game is legitimately difficult on the assumption that Jalen Hurts is not going to be anywhere close to 100%. And if he is a static target, does that mean that he's going to get lit up at some point? Does it mean that maybe he moves so poorly that they do on purpose turn to Kenny Pickett and say, hey, our fate is in your hands there? I think that's a possibility. I think the other thing that really, I know people want to kind of gloss over this kind of thing, but these are in fact human beings out there. And the Washington side of things is loosey-goosey across the board. They understand where they are. They are so far ahead of schedule. There's a sense of out of their depth. The devil may care attitude on one sideline, and then across the sideline in Philadelphia, home field disadvantage warning coming here for Philadelphia. If they do not get off, if that game is close, the nervous energy from the stands will permeate its way onto both sidelines and negatively impact the home team and boost the road team. There's a chance here with the commies, especially without the guy at the trigger. We don't know what Jalen Hurts is going to be doing. I do think that the Jenga piece, the Jenga theory is for me that in the 21st century, if you remove the wrong piece, the entire roster can collapse. Jalen Carter is the X factor. I think Cosme being down furthers that. I'm going to ride with Philadelphia here, and I'm going to go over a touchdown in victory there. I do think that they ultimately win this one by roughly 10. And end what's been a great run for the commies here. But, man, like I say, I don't think you can sleep on the fact that if you give the commies a sense of like, oh my goodness, this is really happening kind of vibe, it can get real scary for the people sitting in the stands and standing on the sidelines.
And I think to one other point you made, the idea of, Jalen Hurts got injured midway through the last time they played. They were winning right it off. Well, that didn't change the fact that Philly's defense gave up 36 points to the Commanders in a game where the Commanders committed 4 or 5 turnovers. So, there's something there as well. I'm with you. If I knew for a fact that Hurts's knee was healthy, I would feel very strongly about the Eagles winning and covering. So the doubt in my mind is completely tied to his knee. We will get into the AFC Championship game, a couple of teams you may have heard a little bit about, right after this. We're back, and it's time for Under the Week. Under the Week is brought to you by DraftKings. What's better than watching football and basketball on the weekend? Watching it with the DraftKings Sportsbook app in your hand. Our partner DraftKings hooking up all new customers who bet $5 and they'll get $150 instantly in bonus bets. So let's get right into it. Bills Chiefs. The total is 47.5 for this game, and normally on the show, I'd have all bunch of analytical reasons why we like the under in this one. To be honest, every sort of stat and trend we looked up went both ways. If you looked at Mahomes, you looked at Allen, you looked at championship games, you look at weather, you look at this, you look at that. It was all around 500 for teams in this situation. So I can't say, well, we've got a 65% chance here when Mahomes is the quarterback and they're home and they're playing a team that averaged at least blah 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 points. The under hits. That's not the case. So I'm just going to go back to some old football analysis here. This is not the game from a couple years ago where neither team could stop each other. Okay, and what I think the two reasons I feel most strongly about this is one, the Chiefs offense is still somewhat broken. I don't care. I've seen a lot of revisionist history in some of my favorite handicappers this week talking about, oh, your model has to have the Chiefs ahead of the Bills. And we're forgetting that they demolished luck rankings this year by an astounding margin, that there was a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of one-score games. They certainly didn't look great against the Texans. This offense is not right, largely because the offensive liners were not right. And I think the Bills will consistently get pressure. On the other hand, a lot of faith in Steve Spagnuolo, especially with their corners healthy. You saw the way the Bills wanted to attack the Ravens, and that was with a more conservative game plan. The most underrated part of the Bills' attack is their rushing game and their offensive line. So I think they're going to try and control the clock against the Chiefs. I think this is going to be a short game. And look, 47.5 is a scary number. Could these teams go over it? Yes, but I'm looking at like a 24-20 game here. So give me the under in Bills Chiefs. And as we mentioned, Under the Week is sponsored by DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code Underdogs and bet just $5 on any wager and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code Underdogs only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours, and the crown may be yours, but the microphone is Dave's. Dave, let's get into this game. You can comment on my under pick. You can go wherever you want. How do you see this game playing out?
I'm going over in this game, as a matter of fact, and I think the Chiefs get it. It's very specifically 30-26 is how I see it. I completely hear the points that you're laying out there. I also think for the Buffalo Bills offensively and overall, there is a philosophical battle, a tug of war between Sean McDermott and what's happened. I do think it's kind of sort of fair to point at him for why the Bills haven't gotten deeper in postseasons past. I think Joe Brady kind of offsets that. We talk about the progressive offensive coordinator. It's not a coincidence that the Bills have soared since Ken Dorsey was shown the door and Joe Brady came in there, and the Bills have looked different ever since. I think Taylor Rapp and Christian Benford are not small absences for the Bills if they're down against Patrick Mahomes and the pass game there. I do think, as a matter of fact, that whatever the Bills want to do, whatever the Chiefs want to do with limiting the superhero quarterback on the other side of things, I don't think it tracks that way. I think it's been building through 17 games. I guess I get the seduction of the Chiefs being a mediocre operation given their performance. It's not just 2024, it's the last couple seasons where in Arrowhead the Chiefs don't cover against almost anybody. Once again, by the way, that safety last week, that was just the best to close out that game, just the best. But I think that aside from everything I just said, I do think that the Chiefs do in fact cover this one, and I think they do advance to the Super Bowl. I think that they understand the stakes. I think that they understood them in July. I think that when they had to go 3 games in the AFC just to get to last year's Super Bowl, I don't think that the message to them was, see, we can do this. If push comes to shove, we can win these 3 games on the road. I think the lesson was, let's not mess around in 2024. And instead, let's make sure we get that number 1 seed. Smart move, because 75% in the last, I think, 24 years it is, 75% of teams that have a bye go to the Super Bowl. The Lions are obviously already gone. The Chiefs do take advantage of that advantage, and they survive the Bills and go to the Super Bowl.
All right, in the few minutes we have left, let me push you on this a little bit, okay? What have you seen from the Chiefs that leads you to believe their offense will be more effective against the Bills than it was last week against the Texans when they rushed 22 times for 50 yards? That's 2.3 yards per carry. And Mahomes was 16 to 25 for 177 yards, and there was constant pressure in his face. How do you compensate for what we know is a real issue on the offensive line and score enough points to beat a Bills team that you know can score?
Well, we do the "what have you done for me lately" league thing and try and take messages from it. I think "what have you done for me lately" good things if you're Travis Kelce, and by the way, Chris Jones too. The whole thing has been this weird build, and I don't know how you have the luxury in today's pro football to get away with doing this, but that you can have your stars or some percentage of your stars on a pitch count and actually get to this point is remarkable stuff. But that's where the Kansas City Chiefs are versus probably pretty much everyone else in the NFL. And I think that they have improbably mastered how to get Travis Kelce as a decoy for the majority of the season, and then he turns it on when the games start to matter. I don't mean to make it just about Travis Kelce. Obviously, Xavier Worthy's emergence down the stretch was significant. Are they going to lean on him? Hollywood Brown. I think Nuke Hopkins has been quiet of late. I think they have the weapons. I think it's been a little overstated. I think what you hit on is exactly right. It's the offensive line that's the issue. I think that the Bills, though, don't present as rugged a defense as probably D'Amico Ryans threw at them last week, specifically on the back end with the injuries. I think that's a legit practical edge that the Chiefs now have going into this one.
Definitely fair, but please don't talk to me about Hollywood Brown. I was ready. He looked good at the end of the regular season. I had way too many shares of him in daily fantasy last weekend, and that blew up in my face with a 0 catch performance. So that still stings. But I hear you. God, I just feel like it's the Bills' time. I really, really do. And I really do think that their offensive line and James Cook are both perennially underrated.
Agree
They
with
can do
that.
a lot. I do hope they. You heard Romo screaming about it all game. I do hope they use Josh Allen's legs more in this game. It is such a weapon. You see the way the Commanders have leaned into Jaden Daniels and just give him 15 carries. Like this guy is a machine.
If not now, when, right? You
Exactly.
cut them loose. You cut them loose for this one. But also, I do think, and not to lean too heavily into the human element of it, but you say this is the Bills' time. I think they understand that. Like, the clock is at 11:59, same as the Ravens, same as the other teams you would point to. I think there is a pressure weirdly coming into. I mean, you're the two-time champs. You're chasing the all-time history. You establish yourself, if you're KC, as the best team. No matter what Tom Brady and Gronk and Belichick and otherwise ever accomplished, that moment when they had a chance to beat the Giants and go undefeated and slipped away, that haunts them and will haunt them for decades remain. They will always think about that. The Chiefs get where they are, and yet there doesn't feel like there's pressure on them. It feels like the pressure is on the Buffalo Bills. Like, you better get it done this year.
I
Or we
agree
don't
with
know
that.
what.
I agree with that. It does feel like if you're backing the Chiefs, though, you're backing sort of nebulous factors like
Mm-hmm. I agree.
mystique of
Mm-hmm.
coach and quarterback and knowing how to win and things that I normally dismiss, but we did see it with the Patriots for a long time in situations where we thought they would slip up. They kept, they just kept rolling. I just think this Bills team is better than some folks are giving them credit for, but we'll see. Really enjoyed having you on the show for the first time, Dave. Don't be a stranger. Enjoy the games this weekend.
You do the same, Jordan. And then on the other side of football season, I heard you mention the basketball. I know you like leaning into to college ball, NBA, and otherwise. I want to talk about the Pitt Panthers' chances of making the tournament, and then let's get into a little bit of puck too. Springtime. Oh, nothing like betting the goal line. That's the best bet in sports.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks, Dave.